Thank you, Katie. Susan DeLay has been writing Delayed Reaction, a weekly syndicated feature column since 1998. She is the managing editor and director of media relations at Willow Creek Community Church and the Willow Creek Association, an organization that encompasses more than 8,000 churches internationally. In addition, she is writing Without a Sound, a novel and book, one of a trilogy that takes place in Germany during World War II and exposes the dangers faced by the deaf community in the Third Reich. Some of you may remember, if you've been coming long enough, that I believe she read another chapter from that about a year ago, and it was riveting. So, welcome, Susan.
Could you hold this? I see a pen, I'll want to keep writing in it. Okay, so this is from Without a Sound, and if I read once a year, eventually I'll get the book done, I think. So it's Berlin, 1938. Joshua Bergman, a Jewish jeweler, is preying on the weakness of a greedy Hermann Goering, everyone's favorite Nazi. Hermann Goering closed his eyes and swished a gulp of white wine in his mouth before swallowing. He held up a beefy hand, silencing anyone who might distract him while he concentrated on experiencing the wine with all his senses. From all appearances, he was a connoisseur. In reality, he was just a glutton with very expensive tastes. Relegated to the shadows in the back of the room, Joshua Bergman took it all in, wondering if at any moment Goering might begin gargling the Riesling. Shoulder blades grazing the heavy draperies that covered one wall of the Berlin apartment, Joshua had expected the servants to greet him with silent nods, I'm so sorry, or at least curious looks. What would possess a Jew to present himself at the home of the second most powerful man in the Reich? Instead, they averted their eyes for fear recognition might be mistaken for defiance of the party. Hardly a stranger to the Berlin apartment, Joshua had stood on the sidelines of the Reich Marshal's extravagance before, surrounded by fine oil paintings from the old masters that made it seem more like an art gallery than a residence. But this was no casual visit. It was a risk he had to take. It was time. The small gold bowl on the table at Goering's elbow caught Joshua's attention. It was etched with images of Grecian women, their garments loose, hair piled on their heads, with tendrils falling around their necks. It wasn't so much the bowl that drew his eye, but what lay inside, a splendid array of sapphires, rubies, and emeralds, including a 2-carat alexandrite. The alexandrite was often mistaken for an emerald, but in ambient light, its hues danced between greens and the deep reds of a raspberry. It was the first stone Goering had purchased from Bergman's jewelers, and it had been the beginning of a mutually profitable relationship. Joshua providing the valuable gems to the Reichsmarschall, and in return receiving funding for underground activities that, if caught, could send him to a firing squad. Joshua gripped the handle of his worn leather case. If things went well, the Reichsmarschall would add a trophy diamond to his already impressive collection. And Joshua would walk away with a fortune that would help expedite the last of the transactions before it was too late. Goering let out a grunt as he leaned forward and set his wine glass on a silver tray. With a wave of his hand, he dismissed the servants, and one by one they exited, leaving the two men alone. Except for Goering's heavy, rhythmic breathing, the room was silent. Finally, he spoke. "I understand you have been away." Joshua took that as his cue to approach, always respectful, always subservient. "Yes, Herr Reichsmarschall, an unfortunate and rather sudden departure." Goering narrowed his eyes. "Unfortunate? A few minutes at Sachsenhausen is unfortunate. A few months is," he shook his head, "tragic." He canted his numerous chins as he looked at Joshua. "I see you no longer have your beard. Did you lose that at the camp?" "It will grow back." Goering nodded. "And your beautiful wife, where is she?" How did Goering know about Marthine? Joshua couldn't say she was at home, alone. For all he knew, Gehring would press a secret buzzer and send a Gestapo thug to drag her to the apartment. She's visiting my mother in Amsterdam. Another lie. Folding his hands across his belly, Gehring said, "You could have come to me for help, you know. I wouldn't presume to impose upon you." "Why not? Everyone else has, including my brother, the dissident." "Dissident?" Gehring roared. "Albert is an embarrassment. He has more Jewish friends than Aryan." He paused. "No offense." He mopped his forehead, then stuffed the handkerchief back into his pocket. "Very well, show me what you have." With a deferential nod, Joshua purposely crouched at Gehring's feet, a not-so-subtle act designed to please Fat Herman, and removed a box from his case. Shaking the contents into his palm, he held it out. "I wanted you to see this first." Squinting, Gehring peered into Joshua's hands. "It looks like a rock." Joshua smiled. It was a rock, an extremely valuable one. "It's a diamond, 68 carats, uncut." 68? Gehring leaned back in his throne-like chair. "That's a paperweight." "Perhaps, but the King of England had other plans for it." Joshua's mention of royalty had aroused Gehring's interest. "The king, you say?" "The diamond belongs to British royalty." "Go on." "It's part of the Cullinan diamond, a 3,000-carat stone mined in South Africa several decades ago and given to the crown." Gehring raised an eyebrow. "Crown jewels?" "Yes." "Well, how did this one come to be in your possession?" Joshua took a breath and lowered his voice. "The Cullinan was entrusted to the House of Asher, and the great Joseph Asher himself cleaved it into 9 primary stones and approximately 100 smaller ones. The larger of the 2 were set into King Edward VII's scepter and crown, but part of the history of this diamond has been tampered with." "How so?" asked Gehring. "There were 10 major stones, not 9. Gehring slowly took his eyes off Joshua and focused them on the rock. "And that is the 10th? "It is." "How many carats will it be once it's cut?" "It's hard to say, of course." Joshua drew his fingers down his cheek. "At least 40. Gehring sucked in his breath and reached for the diamond, which Joshua readily relinquished. 40 carats, said Gehring, drawing out the words as he turned the stone over in his hand. "How large is 40 carats?" Joshua closed his eyes, calculating. "The size of a walnut." "Then I simply must have it." Gehring closed his fingers around the stone. "How much?" He had taken the bait. "A fair price." Gehring smiled. "You know that I have the power to take it from you." "You won't take advantage of me after all these years." "Then you, my Jewish friend, are a fool." Joshua was prepared for this. "You are entirely within your right to take it from me, of course, but it will offer little value to you in its uncut state." Gehring's reddened face meant only one thing. He realized he'd been outsmarted by a Jew. "Any gemologist can cut this," said Gehring, holding the stone up to the chandelier. "Ah, but how many can be trusted with the task? Cleaving a diamond takes special tools and extraordinary skill. When Joseph Asher split the Cullinan, it is said he fainted, and he was the finest cleaver in the world." Joshua suppressed a smile. Nothing added intrigue to a story like a rumor. Gehring clenched the diamond so firmly his bulbous fingers whitened. "Then I shall take it to the House of Asher, and they shall confiscate it. Agents of the Crown have searched for this missing gem since 1910. Take it to them, and they'll relieve you of it and return it to London. If you were to be charged with possessing something that was stolen, there could be consequences." Joshua waited as the color drained from Gehring's face before adding, "And in these days of delicate political negotiations, I wonder how the Fuhrer might perceive such an accusation of theft." "But I'm not the one who stole it," Gehring protested. Joshua smiled again. "That could be difficult to prove." "But you stole it." "No, my father purchased it from a Turkish diamond merchant who was in Amsterdam the day the Ashers split the stone. One of his employees took it, and he sold it to the traveling merchant who dubbed it the Elmas diamond." It was years before my father knew the whole story. The Elmas diamond. Gary blinked slowly, obviously mulling over the prestige that came with purchasing a diamond so important it had a name. How much? Joshua began reeling Garen in. How much? Yes, how much to cut it? When he told Garen the price, he gasped. That's a ridiculous price for cutting a rock. Yes, said Joshua, but the diamond is free.